Varman is a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Business Economics and Accounting at Help University. He is also a fellow at the Chartered Management Institute of UK. Apart from his involvement in the academic world, Mr. Ravi produces extensive management consultancy in the area of corporate training and sustainable development. This is usually where I would say, let's give him a round of applause. But since we are in the digital world, so I'll request that you tap your keyboard for him. Mr. Ravi, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kishan. So we are here today to discuss a very critical topic, all right, which is about Industrial Revolution 4.0. And particularly one area that we need to look at is critical thinking amongst undergraduate. So embedding critical thinking as part of the curriculum has become an important aspect of any pedagogy. So applying critical thinking in practice, students need to have confidence, and more importantly, they have to have minimal anxiety about their abilities. One of the things that I have personally experienced with students is many of them have got a lot of ideas, thoughts, and even skills. But unfortunately, owing to lack of confidence and a lot of anxiety, you find that they are not able to put that in practice, and it is not coming out. So therefore, in order to bridge the gap between students' abilities, students' ideas, all right, we have at Help University, what we have done is we have approached teaching via case-based learning to address critical thinking skills, to increase confidence, and more importantly, to decrease anxiety amongst business students in solving cross-industry business challenges, all right? So critical thinking is an important skill for students, all right? And it's a central theme of all of our major business courses, all right? So what is critical thinking? It is basically a mode of reflective thinking, all right? Where a decision is made based on logic and rationale, and more importantly, using credible evidence. One of the things that we find that when we approach teaching using textbook, all right, or even theoretical base, you find that student can conceptually understand the syllabus, conceptually understand the theme of that particular subject matter. But when it comes to application, when it comes to applying what they have studied, all right, that's where the problem lies. So what we have done in order to bridge the gap, in order to facilitate the process of reasoning, reflection, and judgment, this is where case-based approach seem to fit in very well with this perspective, all right? Now, one of the things we also found, all right, many students are more inductive than deductive reasoners, all right, which means that they learn better from examples than from logical development, starting from basic principles. So the use of case studies, therefore, have been very effective method in classroom teaching technique. More importantly, the major advantage of teaching with case studies, we find that is very engaging, all right? Students find it very engaging. Students find that the approach is allows them, all right, to use their own thought process, to use their own skills, and more importantly, to experiment on their ideas by in order to solve a particular case or in order to deal with a particular problem. So by virtue of case study approach, on our part, we believe that we are able to improve student skills in 4 major areas. Number 1 would be problem solving. Number 2 is exposure to analytical tools, whether it's quantitative or whether it's qualitative, depending on the case material. And we are also giving them an opportunity to deal with complex situations. And the last one, very important, which is more of an internal issue, where in order to cope with ambiguities. All right, there are two types of ambiguities. One ambiguity is internal, where the students themselves find that the uncertainty and their insecurity of their own talent. All right, that's one. Secondly is the ambiguity of data or information that's available. So we are able to, by virtue of case study, they are able to experiment. Right? And again here, real life cases gives students an opportunity to deal with real life data or information. So case studies and discussion method pedagogy are basically replacing lecture, small group discussion as the primary mode of our teaching. And case study approach is definitely a teaching method that enhances critical thinking skills amongst our students. And one key innovation that we have implemented is the introduction of real-world data-driven case studies. That means it's not, some of these case studies could be historical case studies, but more importantly, with the availability and access to real-time information, we are not only dealing with what do you call that, pre-recorded cases, but we are allowing students to deal with current real-time cases, right? So therefore, the involvement, more importantly, their empathy towards the situation is greater because this is what they basically experience. So we wish to expose our students to business problems that will help them relate the material taught in class with their own major, be it marketing, be it international business, be it entrepreneurship, regardless. All right. So case studies are introduced as group assignment and are motivated in class or in discussion sessions. So this way, students are always on their toes dealing with issues. And students select their own group, and we also give the leeways for students to actually establish their own group where we can actually see group dynamics being developed within their own entity. So this is this is an avenue for them to even develop their soft skills. And more importantly, we also engage students with the industry via taking on small projects for the industry. And this way, not only they fulfill their academic obligation, but they also are able to obtain hands-on exposure to real-life scenarios. So our approach, all right, basically builds valuable competencies, in particular in the area of problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration. And we have also updated the way students are being evaluated. Therefore, case studies are graded based on rubrics that clearly communicate our expectations to students. Not only our expectations, but the rubrics also represents the expectations of the industry. Thank you, Dr. Kishan.
Thank you, Mr. Ravi. That was very insightful. From my angle here, you look like a sage on the stage. So it's one good way that we have case-based, whereby we allow students to actually express themselves rather than have the lecture sitting right in front and being taking the center stage. Yeah, definitely it has worked for me also. But is that all there is to it? Well, we want to hear from our next speaker, who is an expert in from the industry. Okay, so let's hear about the expectations of the industry. Our next speaker is Mr. John Patrick Thompson. Mr. Thompson is a senior banker with more than 35 years of experience in banking operations and treasury business. His experience and international stints has given him so much exposure in the global business evolution and expectations. I believe he has so much to share with us today. Without wasting any more time, let's welcome Mr. John Patrick Thompson. Mr. John, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kishan. Thank you very much. Well, that was a really one overwhelming kind of introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to all of you. For the next 15 minutes, I will be speaking on the banking industry in general, the impact of the COVID-19 to the industry and what is expected of new entries as we enter into a new era. Now, the banking industry has evolved tremendously over the last, since I was in the banking industry. I joined the banking industry in the mid 80s. So from then till now, fast forward, there has been huge developments in the banking industry, just like other industries. Okay, just a little bit to share about banking industries. I think all of you know what's the banking industry all about. Basically, it's about deposits and loans, and some of you who are more technical would like to get yourself involved in some forex trading. Yeah, these are all basically what we do in the treasury. In addition to that, basically other things are also very important. So we don't really think that for the banking industry we only have people with accounting background, people with economics background, and basically also there are other disciplines which are very, very important to the banking industry. What Mr. Ravi mentioned just now was very important. What he mentioned was critical thinking. That really caught my attention, critical thinking. Basically, moving forward, it's not like those days you come, you do what you are told. Nowadays, you are expected to have critical thinking. That's where the universities come in to help you to develop that. Okay, so critical thinking, challenging the status quo. You guys have to challenge the status quo because, as Ravi mentioned also, you guys have ideas, a lot of ideas, but then maybe a bit shy. You rather hold back. You don't want to say it out. Maybe afraid of being criticized or so forth. No, that's not the way. Myself, as a manager in the bank, basically, when I look for people, right, I look for the X factors. Yeah, you have your paper. So what? Everyone has papers. No big deal. We look for the X factor. So this is what a university like HELP can give you guys. Basically, the importance of thinking outside of the box is very, very important. So what you learn in uni, you apply in what you work when you go into the working environment. Okay, back to the banking industry. Basically, banks are there, as you know, during the COVID-19, you may or may not know, banks basically were in full operations. You need banks around no matter what happens, unless there is a huge catastrophe when nobody can leave the house. Basically, without the banks, for a moment, you think the ATM would have money without banks around, or banks where everybody was at home? It's not going to happen, right? So in order to get the economy moving, to get things moving, people need money to live day by day. So basically, that's where the banks are very, very important. Okay, so talking about this, what I'd like to say is the bank has basically evolved, as I mentioned earlier, for the bank has evolved very much forward after the industry movement into the next level of industrial revolution. The industrial revolution, basically a little bit on industrial revolution, it started somewhere in the 18th century where you had the locomotives and so forth. Fast forward, then we have the television, the cameras, and now we're moving into IR4, which is something I think that is very, very advanced. Now, banks are very much involved in this. As you have your apps in your phone, those are all basically what we talk about in the IR 4.0. So moving on, I think with the COVID-19, what has happened now is that banks overnight, banks had to grow up. No, we do not work from our specific offices anymore. Banks are now divided into three parts, three locations: your main office, your home, and also you have a disaster recovery site. Meaning the moment the COVID-19 hit in, banks had to split, what we call split operations. So basically, the workforce is very important. So you guys, when you come into the workforce, you realize that you will have to adapt differently. But when you guys come into the working force, I think in 3 years time, it'll be very, very different from how it is now, or how it is pre-COVID-19, whereby everybody worked in an office as far as the bank is concerned, unless you are a relationship manager or you were basically selling credit cards and so forth, you worked outside. But beyond that, everyone worked in an office. But when you guys come into the workforce, as I mentioned, 3 years time, it'll be very different. Some of you will be working in office, some will be working from home, and probably in various other locations. Due to that, you need to have various skills. Now, these skills can only be given if you learn the skills and also develop them within yourselves. Okay, so and what is needed for banking industry? Basically, in the banking industry, we don't only look for, as I mentioned, for those with the degrees in accounting, finance, and economics. We also look for those with engineering background. Now, in the treasury side where I am from, basically, those with engineering background is very important. Engineering, IT, computer science, even legal. Now, these are disciplines which are very, very important to the banking industry. Okay, so all in all, I think we can see the development of those days where banks use books as ledgers. Now, move fast forward, everything is basically computerized. So we have really moved up to the 4.0, and we do not stop here. It's ever changing, and every day you see there is a new system, there's new product coming to the market. So all in all, I think it's a very dynamic and ever changing industry, the financial industry. Okay, so as far as banks are concerned, workforce ability is very important. So you guys are the workforce. When you complete your university degrees, you come to the workforce. And technology and system capabilities are very important. That's what banks need to have. Technology and system capabilities. Operation resilience. Operation resilience meaning we don't only work from one place, you work remotely and so forth. So all these are also very important. Implementation risk. Risk is something that you cannot avoid. Risk is something nobody can avoid. And banks basically dealing with your money has to be very, very savvy, very, very high tech when it comes to protecting, or should I say, risk management. Okay, regulatory impact. What it means is that all banks, as you know, are governed by the Central Bank of Malaysia. So basically, we need to be
Sorry for
very.
forwarding neatly, though. Sorry for forwarding it.
Sorry. Okay, and then
Can I remind the participants to please mute yourselves? Thank you.
Okay, so we need to have standard operating procedures which are in line with the central bank. This is very important. Now, in terms of crisis like now, what is happening now? Okay, the C19, although we are in recovery mode, we have flattened the curve, we are moving very nicely, 95, 96% recovery. Great job, everyone. So what is important is information security, cyber security. We got to be careful of cyber security and fraud and phishing and so forth. These are things which come into the market when we see there is a crisis going on. So basically, you guys who have background or who intend to take up these disciplines, basically like computer science and IT technology, these are very important subjects for you to learn. Okay, not forgetting accounting and economics, finance. These are things you must have. You must have. So that's why most people now coming into the market, basically they have not only degrees, they also have masters. So it's very high moving forward for everyone. Okay, and legal concerns, and when there are cyber attacks, basically banks really need strong legal people protecting the banks, because sometimes we need to protect ourselves also when it comes to legal disputes. So basically, those of you who are in the legal profession or intending to go into law, I think this is something that's very good, very relevant moving forward. So other than that, human resources is very important, very, very important, as mentioned also earlier. Basically, what is required of staff when we take them is awareness. Their awareness, as I mentioned, thinking outside the box. Okay, communication. You need to have good communication skills. Communication is very important because banks, we always talk about communication and teamwork. If you are a silo person, it's very difficult for you to move forward. Okay, so you need awareness and communication. Emotional impact. When sometimes you get stressed out and so forth, there are always people there to help you, so not to worry so much. Okay, so all in all, with this and moving forward, the communication, the committing to work is also very important. Banks also look at this as a very, previously we just say, oh, you just come to work, we don't care how you come to work. Now basically banks are concerned how you come to work. Social connectivity with physical distancing, this is something that is a new norm. Okay, we stay connected but we stay physically apart. This is very important. That's why banks now, previously you could work 30 people in one space. Now it's broken down to 10 people. So the space has maintained, but the people in that space reduced. That's why we have work from home and we have work from alternative sites. Okay. Basically, also we need to secure the working environment, new ways of working, as I mentioned earlier. These are very important. No more just one person sit at the desk with their colleagues on the left and the right. Basically, you work more distance than before. So with the new dawn, this is a new norm, okay? And the status quo is the thing of the past. Do not stick to the status quo. We got to move forward. We got to think outside of the box. Like going back to, once again, what Mr. Ravi mentioned, critical thinking. So ladies and gentlemen, this is just to share with you a little bit what has happened in the industry and in a very compact manner. And basically, I hope you have be able to get some knowledge from what I've just informed you. One more thing, being a guy from the Treasury, basically the concern I think some of you may have is how will Malaysia recover for this? Will we have a V recovery, U recovery, or L recovery? These are the shapes. A V is a fast recovery, a U is a slower recovery, L is a long time we take to recover. Very interesting, but then I think all of us need to play our part in the recovery from COVID-19. And before I end, I just like to quote something from someone who's very, I find his words are very, very useful, very, very wise. What this man said is that the future depends on what we do in the present. He also says that learn as if you were to live forever. With this, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. That was amazing. Um, I feel good that we have confidence that the bank must go on as usual. Otherwise, I will run to the bank and take my money out first. So it's good that you gave us that assurance. I just remembered a joke that's going around. What pushed IR 4.0 more than anything else? It was not the CEO, it was not the COO, it was COVID-19. COVID-19 pushed it all the way. And today we realize how important it is to be digitally connected more than any other phase in our lives before. So thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you so much. Now I would like to welcome our third speaker, our only rose among the thorns. Ms. Sumati Paramasivam is a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Business, Economics and Accounting at Help University. She has more than a decade of experience in marketing and sales. She now imparts a wealth of experience and knowledge to the next generation of marketing professionals as an academic. Her involvement in the field of education for more than 20 years has given her a solid background in training and development. Ms. Sumati Paramasivam, I now invite you to share your thoughts with our viewers. The floor is yours. The stage is yours, rather.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kishan. Thank you so much for the introduction. Let me tie in. Let me tie in what the business department has been has done, and will be doing to link between the education institution with the industries. Now, there are 4 methods that we are actually undertaking to ensure that the way we deliver the content is actually filling up the gaps that has been identified by the industries. Now, as I said, there are 4 ways that we are doing it. The first one I would say would be the faculty. Now, it is very important that we do have people who are able to deliver what is required by the industry. In that way, I am really proud to say that the faculty has the experience, they have the knowledge, and they have the exposure to actually do this. Now, what the faculty is doing is they have immense experience, teaching experience, but they don't only have teaching experience, they are also having being exposed to the industry. They have been consultants, they have been examiners, practitioners, some of them. So which means that when they go to the classroom, they are actually bringing parts of the industry to the classroom. Now, this is very important. What I'm trying to say here is the faculty is not only teaching the old method, the old way, where we enter the classroom and then we tell them, okay, open up the textbook and we start teaching. Now we bring the industry to the classroom. This is something which is done very well in the business department. So I'm very, very proud of saying that. They have managed to incorporate this into the teaching, into the assessments, into the everyday life, so that the students are exposed to certain elements of the business. So I would say that one of the first method that we are actually doing is we are ensuring that the faculty is actually doing this. Now, the second one I would say would be the curriculum itself. Now, the program structure is also designed in a similar manner. The program structure is not done in isolation. It is actually done with consultation with the industry, because we need to know what is needed in the industry. We need to know what is the gap there. We need to know what are the students who have graduated much earlier. What do they lack? We need to know that, is that lacking that is there? Has that been easy for the industry to handle? Or is it very difficult for the industry to handle? Or the industry is feeling this is something really a big issue? So these are things that we have to understand. So which means that when the program is being designed, it is being done with consultation with the industry. So the industry gives their input in. And based on the input, they do indicate what subjects or what are the new things that's happening around, new technologies that need to be incorporated inside, or what are practices that is already outdated, that industry feels that this is not relevant anymore. So these are the things that will be taken into consideration. And with this, the program will be structured. So this is the second thing that we are doing, which means that the program that's being structured, the program that's been delivered in the business department are programs that is looking into these areas. Now, another one which I am very, very passionate about is the assessment styles. Now, the assessments in what we do here, there are several methods that the assessments are done. I'm just going to compare with the old ways and what we are doing today. When I talk about the old ways, I mean about the times when I was in the university. You'll find that it was basically like a statement is given to you, and you are supposed to go to the library, search from the library, do a lot of referencing, and then write it up and then submit. What do we learn? We learn how to read very well. We learn the content. Yes, we do. We learn how to write very well. But is it practical or is it not practical is always being questioned at the end of the day. Now, today, we have moved away from that kind of assessments. The assessments that we do today is something that I call, it's a marriage. The assessment is a marriage between education institution and also the industry. Now, we call this authentic assessments, whereby we actually go to the industry and we ask the industry what needs to be done. For example, if I want to do an advertisement, so let's say I would approach Proton Saga and I'll ask Proton Saga, look, what can I do? For example, we want to do for you for, say, your buntings. Okay, what kind of budget do you have? And can my students actually do certain elements or also have discussions with your advertising team? So the assessment is done in such a way that the student actually go to the industry, they sit down there with them, they discuss with them, and then they design. Now, this is very much practical based. Now, why this is done today is because we want the students to be aware of what is happening out there. Us telling them that when you are designing something, these are the issue number 1, issue number 2, issue number 3, issue number 4. We can tell that very well to them. And students would very happily note it down. But how much of that would they understand in practical? Okay, that is something very important. So what we do now is we make them go to the industry, to a company, go and have discussions with them. So a certain part, a certain task is taken from the industry. We take the task and we give it to the students, and the students has to do that. Now, when the students are doing the task, they're doing the task by looking at the books, looking at journals, yes, But at the same time, they are also discussing with the industry, the people from Proton Saga, for example. They are going down there and they're asking them what are the ethical issues they have to consider. They're going to take a look into what are the things that they cannot do. Okay, what are the regulations that they got to comply with. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing is, when they design it, they have to also now think from the consumer point of view. Is this a design that my consumers like? Is it something my consumers love to look at? Or would the people looking at the ad, would they feel that there's something in this ad that is, that is against my culture, against my norms? So this is something important also. So they won't learn this unless they do it. So when you have design, they go to a company, they show it. The company will give the feedback and say, no, look at these issues. This is where students have that extra input. Like, this is what the industry is looking at. This is how the things, small nitty-gritty parts that you have to look into. So the assessments are done in that particular manner, and that is something very, very critical. Assessments are, one of the reasons this is being done is also because we want the students to have the exposure. This kind of exposure you do not get from the textbooks. This kind of exposure is a plus point for the students, because this is what the industry wants. The industry wants people, when they go out, they are not quoting from the book. They are not saying, according to Philip Kotler, there is 4 Ps. Maybe we should look at the 4 Ps. The industry is not interested in talks like that. They want to know is, this is the issue. How do you think? How would you manage it? How would you teach it? Okay, which level of teaching should we do? Or can we just ignore it? Not all issues has to be solved immediately. Some issues, you just let it be, it will solve itself. This you get with experience. So these are the exposures that we are doing in the assessment. This is something very important. This is something the industry is looking at. And with our talks with the industry is very happy that such assessments are given. In fact, they are coming forward and giving us tasks. Say, give this to the students and see what happens. And when we give the students, yes, some students are not very happy because they prefer to sit in the classroom and do. But eventually they realize that by doing this, they are getting what needs, the extra information, the extra oomph that's going to make them look good. That when they go out and work, it would actually enhance them a lot more. This is what is very, very important. So this is something that we are doing very, very well. We are actually going to a lot of industries. Industries are giving us tasks, and these are done. Again, I'm going to go back to the faculty. Now, industries can give us the task, but if the faculty doesn't do it, then there's going to be a problem for us. As I said earlier, the faculty is incorporating this into their assessments, which means that there is a very good marriage between the faculty and the industry, and this is benefiting the students a lot. Besides such assessments, we do also have career talks. We bring in people from the industry, because sometimes when we tell, people may not want to accept, but when people from the industry comes in and tells you, this is something very important, look from this particular angle, these are the issues that's facing out there, it is much more receptive. So we do bring people from the industries very frequently. They do have talks. We do bring them into the classroom, especially when you're talking about assessments. We bring them to the classroom to tell them, this is the issue, this is what you're looking at, what would you do? All right, as this can also be linked to what Mr. Ravi has already said, as case-based assessments. We also do assessments as learning, whereby we actually make students work for organizations. So in that, while they're doing their assessments, they are actually working for industries. This is something very good because they learn the industry culture. They learn what needs to be done. They learn that 8 o'clock in the morning means you have to be at work at 8 o'clock. They learn about communication, how to communicate with your coworker, how to communicate with your superior. What are the words that you should be very careful when you are using? How much of freedom you can have when you are actually doing something. These are things that you learn, and these are given to them when they are actually doing their assessments. Again, I'm going to emphasize, as I said, I'm very passionate about this particular element. The assessments are not textbook assessments. The assessments are taken from the industry. We take tasks from the industry and we offer it to the students and we make students do. This is very beneficial for students. beneficial for the students. At the same time, it helps the student, it helps the industry to fill up the gaps also. So it's a two-way thingy down here. We also have a lot of networking. We bring in all students back to tell them what is it all about. We also bring in industry for networking. We have after the class, during the class. This is also being done. Now, again, coming back to the assessments can also be called as a technical skill development. All the assessments that's being done, it is actually fulfilling a certain skill. And the skill is identified, and the students have to go through doing it. So this is something very, very important. I can give various examples that students have done. We have given students opportunity to actually do sales. We actually got companies who actually gave us the products, and we used the products and we gave the students, and the students actually did everything from promotional, from finding the venue to the budgeting, and then for the staffing. And the students learn that, with a very minimum budget, what are the issues that they are facing. The students learn that, certain venue that they chose was not practical, even though they assumed in the initial analysis that this was walk-in was 1,000 people per day. So they assumed that they could make a higher sale. But they found that in that particular venue, the sales was really near to zero. But at another venue where the walk-in was more like 200, and they found that the sales there was really fantastic. So now they started to think, why is there a difference in these two? 1,000 walk-in should give me more sales compared to 200. So which means now there are other factors that's coming in that is influencing the consumers to buy or not to buy. This is something that students start to think. So which means that they're not going in a very funnel, they start to think at the bigger picture. That means there are other factors. What factors? Was it because the way that the corner that we were in, was it too far away? Is it because the product, we did not give it enough visibility? They start to question. This is something very, very important. And this is something that comes from the assessment part. So which means that we are looking into what the industry is telling us, and we are looking into that, and we are doing things that is to fill in that particular gap. The last one I would say down here would be that the collaborations that we have with the industries. We make sure that we do collaborate with various industries, from FMCG to banking to service-oriented. The reason why we do that is because we want them to come back to us and tell us what is it that needs to be done. We also want them to give us tasks for the students. We also want them to come and give talks to the students. And we also want the students to be exposed to them. So this is already being done now, and it will be continued to be done. So which means that we are aware that there are gaps, and we are doing things that is necessary to fill in the gaps. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome, Miss Sumati. I can feel your energy from here. I like the way you said. I'm going back to my university days. That would have been like what, 50 years ago or something. Just kidding, just kidding. All right. I would like to once again thank all our three distinguished speakers. Amazing insights indeed. To sum up what Ms. Sumati has actually said, there's a lot of learning that's taking place outside rather than inside the classroom. We would now like to open the Q&A session. Okay, if you have any questions, please raise your hand on the icon there, or you could post your question in the chat room. Someone has raised. Mr. Stephen, who would like to say? Would you like to ask a question, Mr. Stephen? Someone has raised a question. Mr. Stephen? Okay, we have one question here from Mr. Gopal. he has said that we like to stress on the caringness shown towards the students, listening to their needs and catering for their needs. The fact that students are talked to when they have difficulty, when they are absent, when they do not well in this kind of scenarios, how do you, perhaps I think what he's trying to ask is, how do you handle situations like this when students need a little extra caring in their academic work? So would anybody like to answer that question? Okay, we have one question from Dato Paul Chan. It's for all the speakers. What is the teaching and learning pedagogy? And what is the teaching and learning pedagogy? And second, who employ the graduates? Who are the ones who employ? Would anybody like to answer that? I repeat for the speakers, what is the teaching and learning pedagogy? And who employ the graduates? Would any of our three speakers like to answer that question?
Hi, Dr. Kishan.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, I don't think I can answer the first part. I can answer the second part. Who employs the graduates, right? That was the question. Yeah, basically, of course, being a bank, we employ graduates. Of course, as mentioned in my earlier speech, we employ those with basically not only limited to accounting and economic backgrounds or finance background, even in relation to other backgrounds. Basically, banks are not basically only handling things that are related to finance. Other than that, things like legal, like legal, computer science, and IT, these are also very relevant to the banks. So banks do employ graduates, and basically, currently, I think based on current scenario, yeah, banks are still interested to employ people despite the COVID-19 situation at this point in time. I can vouch that my bank has taken in about 3 people over the last couple of days, last couple of weeks. So I think there is still a demand for graduates in the banking industry. I think that's what the question was about. So I'm just answering that part. Thank you, Dr. Kishan.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Maybe on the part on teaching pedagogy, perhaps two things I believe is very important. One is visualization and the other one is inquiry-based instruction. Generally, you find that academic classrooms tend to be very dull, very one-way kind of communication where students take down notes, or nowadays they record it and that sort of thing. I think in connecting to a meaningful classroom engagement, there should be extensive visualization, all right, where real-time kind of exposure should be given in classroom. And secondly, of course, is inquiry-based instruction. There must be scholar inquiry, or at least inculcating scholar inquiry. Otherwise, it will be talking down kind of approach, which is pretty much outdated. Because old school, perhaps you can talk down, but one of the things that I mentioned earlier about critical thinking is motivating and encouraging students to share their ideas with minimal anxiety. So that is the kind of classroom environment that we have to inculcate, not to put in fear and not to put in too much of instructional based learning. So I think visualization and inquiry-based instruction should be the right direction for the future. And this connects back with what Mr. Thompson said just now, pertaining to what kind of graduates they expect, because they just don't want to look at a student's paper qualification, but they want to see the X factor, what they can do beyond that, whether they are able to manage issues, whether they are able to interact with the issues, whether they are able to come up with, again, I think quoting his word, employees who are able to think out of the box. So that is the kind of environment that we have to inculcate, or the atmosphere we have to create in the classroom. Thank you.
So we need to nurture these graduates, so when they come in, they bring in value-added services to the industry. We have one more question from Dr. Chia here. He said the banking industry has evolved so much since the 1980s. Now we see banks are going into insurance, financial planning, investment, and so on. What do you foresee the banking industry going into next? I believe this question would be more apt for Mr. John.
Thank you, Dr. Kishan.
Industry going into, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kishan.
Yeah,
so basically, as correctly pointed out, yes, the banking industry basically has evolved tremendously since the 80s. So I think there are a lot of, basically what is important now is banks, as they move forward, we look into things that are very important, that what the community needs, what the community wants. Okay, and based on this, basically the banks will package this and basically move forward from here. So a lot of things I would say, and I think is at this point in time I can't really say in addition to that, because there are so many things that the banks are doing nowadays. Okay, not like those good old days. Banks just do borrowing and lending. They take your money for deposits and then they lend it out to people who want to borrow. So it has evolved tremendously. So there's a huge space out there for the banks to move forward, and I think there's no end. Because if you ask me, like say 5-6 years ago, would there be in the banking industry, how has it changed? I would say, wow, it has gone so fast. It has really moved so fast, and what the requirements are, and based on this, I would say a lot to see moving forward. Thank you, Dr. Kishan.
Thank you. I think we need a very high-tech crystal ball to see what's the future going to be like in the next few years to come in the banking industry. But like what you said, it's moving really, really fast. We have one more question here from Ms. Janice. Does the banking industry hire data scientists and data analysts? So again, I think this will be more for for you, Mr. John.
Data scientists and data analysts. I think that is something that the banks will definitely look at, because as banks go into algorithms, I believe this is some part of your background, which I think is relevant to all this. So I would say definitely so, because as I mentioned earlier also, like 10-20 years ago, banks do not even look at, why would banks want to employ engineers? But now banks are employing engineers because of structured products. Now you guys are the one with the expertise. So to the question, I would say definitely yes. But basically, I need to know a little bit more what that constitutes of. But I would say it is something that's very, very relevant indeed. Thank you for the question.
Perhaps that'll be very apt for those who want to see the patterns of consumer banking and patterns of the industry, but I can't answer that. Anyone else would like to answer, Mr. Ravi or Ms. Sumati, with regards to this question? Anybody wants to add on?
No, I think that is the direction that we're looking at, big data analytics. And I think Mr. Thompson mentioned about algorithms, where we find that the data crunching has become the order of the day, whether it's in banking, whether it's in retail, whether it's in engineering. It doesn't really matter, because we are looking at constant innovative mode. So if businesses need to be competitive, all right, they have to be constantly be on an innovative mode. So therefore, they have to constantly crunch data to find out what will be the best. So the business cycle has become shorter today. All right. So newer goods and services need to be put up in the market. Any organization lags behind, or any company lags behind, they are going to create a gap, and that gap can actually extrapolate very quickly. And when there's a gap, of course, that will also attract attention by others. So the longer you leave the gap, all right, the more likely that you're going to lose your competitive edge. So I think data crunching is the order of the day, and we are looking at that. But I suppose the definition of data scientists and analysts has to be like what Mr. Thompson said. The definition need to be clarified, because sometimes it may have a very narrow, what do you call it, interpretation, all right, from old school. But today, when we look at data scientists, we are not just looking at what do you call it, a particular industry. We are looking at cross-industry application. So in that sense, a data scientist today cannot just be, let's say, for example, somebody with an IT knowledge or with a statistics knowledge, but they need to have understanding or knowledge in biomedical, maybe in pharmaceutical, in construction, civil engineering, or whatever area that need to be applied. So I think the scope of data scientists, I think it's need to be clarified, because the owing to cross industry collaboration, you find that the boundary seems to be expanding further. So therefore, data scientists need to have a wider perspective of what they need to understand. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Welcome.
just to add on a little bit. Just to add on a little bit.
Yes, please.
Data by itself, as you know, it's meaningless. You need to
Yes, sir.
crunch them, and what are you going to do with the data? How are you going to use the data? How is it going to benefit the industry? No, these are all very important. So one thing is, as I mentioned earlier, algorithms. Basically, this is used very much in treasury business. So basically, yeah, it's a very useful tool, I would say. Yeah, just to add on a little bit. Thank you, Dr. Kishan.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Mr. John. Thank you, Mr. Ravi. Are there any more questions from the floor? Any more questions? You can click on the hi-fi button there in front of you, or you could post your questions here. If there are none, then I think our time is almost up. It's already 11:01 actually. So thank you very much to all our three distinguished speakers, Mr. Ravi, Mr. John, and Ms. Sumati. Okay, thank you for the insightful knowledge on what's happening out there. The speakers were the talks were very informative. Okay, and yeah, I believe they've highlighted some of what's happening out there. And I think the key word here is that at the end of the day, the graduates that go into the industry need to value add. Otherwise, there will be very little that your paper can carry. And that's what, like what Ms. Sumati mentioned, we are doing. A lot of teaching is taking place outside the classroom rather than inside. Okay, and we want to move away from that era where the lecturer is the sage and he sits on the stage and he does all the speaking and the rest are just listening one way. But it's got to be more in the future. So if there are any other questions, yeah, I think I see one here. Oh yeah, yeah. Just to add on, the Bachelor of Business Analytics program will be launched in the month of August this year. Well, that's moving one step further for help. So on that note, I would like to thank each and every one of you. Thank you so much. Thank you to the listeners. You've been such great audience, such great panel.
Thank you.